Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that hopefully matters to you. Today, we are honored to welcome a very special guest. Today, we are welcoming Bill Cohen. Bill is a CSA, a Certified Senior Advisor, as well as a caregiving support group leader and speaker. Bill has worked with the Alzheimer's Association as a volunteer and also as an advocate, and he'll be here today to discuss the importance of knowing what resources are available to families who are dealing with long-term care issues. Welcome, Bill.
Good morning, or good afternoon in your case, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're excited to have you. So, Bill, tell us a little bit about how you became interested in becoming a caregiver support consultant and what exactly that entails.
Sure. So, and I can get more of the story about how I was my mother's caregiver, but as I approached retiring from an unrelated 25-year career with government, state government here in Oregon, I came across this concept of a caregiving support consultant. And I thought I was just going to be doing more volunteer work, as I had been doing for a couple of years. But this seemed to resonate with me because I wanted to help as many people as possible and keep active. And this seemed like the way to go. And what I like to ask is, you know how most caregivers are feeling. You help them, you work with them all the time, like I do. Words come to mind like exhausted, overwhelmed, hopeless, alone. And
Scared.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt when I was caregiving for my mom. So imagine if someone could help them through a journey like I did with my late mom for about 10 years and help them manage the care and the behaviors and practice self-care, provide them with advice, support, resources and referrals while collaborating with all the different service providers and professionals. That's what I do. And there's very few of us who do exactly this, because most people in our industry are focused on the care recipient, the person living with dementia, who's supporting the caregiver. And we can, of course, elaborate on that, on ways that we can get support.
So you had mentioned, Bill, when you were caring for your mother, and I know that's been a great motivator for you, and almost say you do it maybe in her honor, right? Where you're helping families get through what you've been through. What was it that experience really led you to wanting to carry it on? Because I know for us, we deal with a lot of families and a lot of caregivers, and oftentimes once that journey for them has come to an end, that because they've had to put so much of their personal life on hold, or careers, or even their family that they're still helping to raise, they're ready to get back to what their lives were previously. What do you think it was about you that made that a little bit different, or made it more of an exception, where you said, you know what, this is what I'm meant to do, and I want to get out there and help more families understand how to be better caregivers, how to get through those struggles?
It's an excellent question. And I think back to when I was starting the journey with mom, that back around the mid-2000s, resources were not as readily available or obvious where to find them. It was the old term, your younger viewers may not, or listeners may not know this one, let your fingers through the walking through the yellow pages. Sure. I mean, that's what we had to do, is to make a lot of phone calls. So when I was attending a support group, and I started that back in 2005, I thought, like most, that I was going to, that was it. I was going to maybe go for a little while, help others to go through the journey themselves, and maybe a little bit of the grieving, the decompressing, shall we say, and then I'd be done. But I kept on going and kept on helping. I became the facilitator. And I was looking back that people like me, like most caregivers, they don't know where to turn for support. They don't know what the resources are. I said, I can help them do that. And going further along, besides becoming the facilitator, I got involved with the Walk to End Alzheimer's and other fundraising and advocacy, et cetera. But as I approached my retirement, like I said, I thought I was going to do more volunteer work, and I found this. And it's been really heartwarming when people, I think the most gratifying thing that I see, whether it's in a support group or working with individual families, is when they realize that they don't have to go it alone, that there are resources, there is support, there is advice available, and you see some of the stress melt away, some of the tension, some of the feeling of hopelessness. They start grabbing the tissue, because the emotions are coming out, and they're relaxing a lot. That is very gratifying to me, because I know what I went through, and I want to make it easier for them.
So with your altruistic approach to caregiving, how did it then transcend into, okay, you know what, this could be a second career for me?
Mm-hmm. I think, well, the way to sum it up is that I took my personal loss and my pain and turned it into my passion, my encore career. I think one way to look at it is that, and you mentioned about doing it in my mom's honor. I remember somebody in one of my support groups, God, it must have been awful to lose your mom, et cetera. I said, partly because of anticipatory grief, or ambiguous grief, some people call it. I had said goodbye long before. And that night, even when she passed away, I wasn't upset. It was a big sigh of relief. She's no longer in pain. She let go. It's over. Everything I've done since then has been in her honor and memory. She was such an integral part of my life. I think the reason why I'm a nurturer was because of her. Mm-hmm. And here's a fascinating woman that was an early adopter of a Mac in the 1980s when she was in her 60s. She was a whiz with finances. She was a master printmaker and professional artist. Wow. I mean, she was an inspirational person to me. So it felt right to first as a volunteer and then to make it a profession. I said, this is what I need to do. Nothing else has resonated with me my entire life. I had 3 previous careers. Now my encore career will be my last, because this is what motivates me.
When did you first become concerned or notice that your mother was having some issues? Because she had Alzheimer's, correct?
Correct, exactly. Yeah. I think, as you know, and most of your listeners, that people don't become symptomatic, until well after it's already been developing. Right. And we've seen the first signs around 2003, 2004. She wasn't handling those finances. She wasn't taking care of the house. Happened to be that she was in the caregiver role for my late stepfather. So she was stressed. She was getting worn out and trying to keep him alive. She wasn't, she was showing signs of paranoia, confusion, yes, memory loss. We were concerned about her driving. And we thought when my stepfather passed away, or if he moved into a care community, would she bounce back? But we never got that opportunity, because what happened in August this week in 2005 on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and New Orleans? Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
A home that had survived all the other storms was completely swept away in the storm surge, which she had evacuated, which she came back fully expecting to see the house. The trauma was just horrible, and it exacerbated and accelerated her condition.
Wow.
So yeah, still wasn't obvious that it was Alzheimer's. Not till for another year or two, we knew it was some form of dementia, but we weren't jumping to that conclusion. I guess maybe we were a little bit of denial.
Sure.
That was the first time my journey that I was. There was another one later. It wasn't until she started wandering and doing dangerous things during a norovirus quarantine at her care community, coincidentally enough. And so it became obvious that we had to put her into memory care, 24/7 lockdown. She could not be by herself anymore. She was probably still a little early, a little smarter than the average bear. She actually got out a couple times.
Okay. So, one thing I find interesting, even speaking with one of our guests a couple weeks ago, Bill, was, kind of similar to your situation where they're now, so to speak, an expert on caregiving and on the Alzheimer's front. But when they were first going through it, they were scared, they were lost, they were confused, they had no clue. And like you mentioned, there wasn't all these great online resources and, support groups that were online and, all these different ways for people to connect with other people going through similar circumstances. When you look back to placing your mom in that care facility for the very first time, and you look at where you're at today, what would you tell yourself if you could go back and talk to your previous, self when you were still kind of unfamiliar, uneducated about the situation? What advice would you give yourself at that point?
Well, fortunately, I did start attending that support group that I still facilitate to this day. I think that was one of the smarter things that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I got some counseling as well, which helped. I would say seek out whatever support and resources you can find. Ask a lot of questions, a lot of people. Unfortunately, a lot of the ones we would think about, I think the medical profession is sorely lacking in providing that support and resources. So be an advocate for yourself and for your loved one. And I learned to do this better, especially working with the care communities. But don't be shy just because they're supposedly the authorities, they're the professionals, right. They know everything. Ask questions and prod and push. Say, hey, this isn't enough. I want a prognosis. I want to know what's wrong with my person, my loved one with dementia.
Right.
I want to know what the treatment plan is, if anything. No, that's not satisfactory. I need to know more. And I think a lot of people are afraid to ask. They just say, oh, really? That's it? And I hear that a lot.
Right. Yeah.
Including even geriatric specialists. I won't get into certain specialties, but yeah, it is sorely lacking. But there's people like, I wish I had known about the adult placement people, the senior housing advisors. I didn't know about them. We were calling various care communities. Now, fortunately, the one that I wanted Mom to go to in Southwest Portland, and the one where she ended up, if she could afford it and she could get in, she could. And I started talking to them soon after she lost her home, and she was on the East Coast before I moved her out here. So if I had known about those professionals, and there weren't as many back then, that was part of it. And nobody was telling me about it. Oh, talk to so-and-so, they'll help you find a good care community or a care home. So I didn't know about that. I didn't know about any checklists like, okay, talk to an elder law attorney, look at in-home care if applicable. What about respite? What about other forms of support? What's in your charitable or religious community? Mm-hmm. What does your own community have that's available? Things like that. And there are some resources now, much more than was available back in the mid-2000s, directories, and of course on the internet. But unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of misinformation. And yes, I agree. There's a lot more resources that are available to families now, which is terrific. And it's a great thing to see. But I think one of the things that is still pretty prevalent, as it was 10 years ago even, it's getting that information out to the people. The information's there, but they have to know to look for it. They have to know what they're looking for. And, that's
they don't know what they don't know.
They don't know what they don't know. Exactly right. And that's one of the reasons we started All Home Care Matters, was just for our own community around us. And it's just, one of those things where, we get emails and, messages from people saying, oh, I never knew this. I never knew that. I just had my mother at the doctor, and why wouldn't he have told me that? And it's concerning that there's not a better awareness in educating the community about the resources that are available, because our baby boomers are the largest, population of people ever. And we're going to need those resources greater than ever. And it's just helping people get the word out.
Right. And also that people have to know what are the resources they can trust.
Yeah. Yes.
Be
Absolutely.
able to get referrals. And that's why I love what your firm is doing. It's not just about home care. It is providing those resources. It is providing support groups. And that is taking a more holistic approach, a broader perspective. I'm a certified senior advisor, and that's exactly what we do. We
Right.
don't work in silos. We should be looking at what else does my client need? Who else do they need to talk to take care of their loved one with dementia and myself?
Yeah, exactly. What are the biggest problems and concerns you would say that caregivers have?
Finding patients. I hear this all the time from clients and from support group attendees, having the patience for the behaviors like the repeated questions or the outbursts or other frustrating things, the sundowning, that they're waking up in the middle of the night and they're not getting to sleep. So yeah, now I was just going to say, how do they take care of their own health?
Right.
And that's really important. How do I get a break? How do I get away? How do I even just go for errands? How do I get a nap? A lot of people, if they somehow can get away for a weekend, they go, even if they pay for an expensive hotel, they crash. They just sleep, because they can't get enough. That's the biggest concerns, is that people will get sick, they'll get burned out, or worse. And I'm sure that you have probably brought out a similar statistic, especially when it comes to dementia, that so often, I think I've heard like 2/3 of the caregivers predecease the person with dementia, which is tragic.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's going to lead me to this question. How do you work with and help families and their loved ones that are living with dementia? How are you affecting them and providing them with your services?
Right. So again, the overall, it's advice, it's support, it's resources, referrals. It's a little bit of soft skills, hard skills.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is, okay, you need to talk to one of these recommended elder law attorneys, for instance. That, like, job one is getting your legal affairs in order and the health documents, etc. It's situations like that. Whether it's home care or it's elder law, how I help them is providing those recommendations so they knew who to talk to, so they feel less alone, they feel supported, they can make good decisions. And again, it's to reduce their stress, help them sleep better at night. Here's a good example. I was helping a client whose father was here in the Portland area.
Okay.
And she's in Chicago. And I was brought in to work with the caregivers in a care home, along with the music therapist. Actually, was a collaborator of Alexis Baker, you had on recently.
Sure, Alexis,
right? Yeah. And well as and a pet therapist. And we put together a team and a plan, because Dad was trying to escape. He was anxious. He didn't have anybody to talk to. He wanted to go back to his old job, which was about 20 miles away. And he needed companionship. So it was partly spending time walking with him, talking with him, giving him some companionship. But also, I made him think that he was working for me. I kind of gave him a job.
Sure.
I made a business cards that looked like mine, but with his picture and his title and his name. And I'd give him things like invoices and purchase orders to fill out. And, the daughter would send me some cash or include in my compensation, and I would give him in an envelope. Here's your pay for this week or this month. So we calmed him down. He had a reason to think, oh, I've got a job. I don't have to go back to the other place. And the whole idea too was, with that team, is the daughter had eyes and ears on the ground here in the Portland area. She didn't have to worry as much. She could sleep better at night. And you know what her job was?
No.
Works for 911.
Oh my. Okay.
So you can imagine her stress level.
Sure. Absolutely.
It was a blessing for her. Unfortunately, the end of last year, his health was going downhill. Weather was bad, COVID, we couldn't visit indoors, and he went downhill and he passed away this spring. But
Oh,
it was very gratifying to be able to help him, give him some pleasure in his last few months, and work with the other professionals, including the caregivers in the care home, and especially help the daughter.
and I think that's a great story. And, that's what it's all about, right? Is being able to have a positive, profound impact in helping another family. And that's a tremendous story. So, Bill, who would you say are your ideal or typical clients, and when would be the right time, if there is a right time, that they should contact you?
Great question. So I have actually had clients that have been anywhere between in their 20s because his mother had early onset Alzheimer's. Actually, that was my first client. It was not who I was expecting. And then others in their 80s, spouses, older siblings. But the vast majority, and my social media metrics, shall we say, bear this out. Ages 35 to 65, mostly adult children, 80 to 85% women. Although more and more men are stepping up as caregivers, it's a women's issue between the caregivers, the care recipients, and the professionals, are primarily women. And they're seeing those first signs of something with their loved one, whether it's some of the things I talked about with my mom, but it could be other symptoms like memory loss, walking into the kitchen and not knowing what to do, or speaking of kitchen, mom's making recipes. For some reason, they don't taste quite the same. She's leaving out ingredients. Hopefully she's not putting in anything she shouldn't be. Or dad can't find his keys to the vehicle, or even worse, he doesn't know what the keys are for, which is really a bigger key than, no pun intended, than losing them, because we all do that because we're all so busy, right? So they don't know where to turn, like we were talking about before. They've seen those first signs. They don't know where to start. And that's the best time, because we want people to be proactive in preparing and planning, not reacting in a crisis.
Exactly. And
I mean, if there's a fall and a broken hip or a stroke or something like that, it's not too late, but you're having to react in a crisis more emotionally, and there's fewer choices open to you on what you can do for your loved one. But if you plan in advance, yes, we want people to thrive at home. We want them to be safe there. We want to be care, and that's where we all would like to be. But there are so many more options in terms of home care, as you well know, and other in-home services. And there's so many more options for housing that didn't exist 20, 30, 40 years ago. In fact, my mom's care committee, when she was in the memory care, looked like an old nursing home.
Yeah.
It's been since renovated, but the key was the care was wonderful. It was nonprofit, faith-based. They did a wonderful job. In fact, the head nurse just retired not long ago after 37 years, and she's still a friend to this day.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And just to touch on what you said, we always tell families, make the choice when you're able to still make it for yourself. Don't make it when it's under distress, pressure, or you may lose the opportunity when you can make the choice for yourself and someone else may have to make it for you. And that goes right back to the elder law issue too. Make sure you have all of your wishes and things documented ahead of time, and make sure people know that you have them, and give them copies, because you never want to have something that you did not wish for. And I just think that's so important.
If I can tell another quick story really quickly,
absolutely.
and it talks about having those discussions among the family, not leaving it up to strangers, et cetera, and definitely talk to an elder law attorney, et cetera. But soon after she lost her home in the hurricane, and we were on the East Coast, and she was still loose enough where we could do the advance directive, the living will, and designate me as the health representative. Knowing some of the questions about antibiotics and intubation and artificial means, et cetera, I asked her this question based upon a case that was still very much in the news back then. I won't say the lady's name. Huh?
Was it the Shivo case?
Yes, exactly. I didn't know if I should mention it, but Terry Shivo, and about being in that vegetative state. And I said, Mom, do you want to end up like Terry Shivo? And she was very clear. Absolutely not. she made her wishes very clear. And that was my guidance
Yeah.
all the way through to her final days when we were going by the pulse and our final decisions.
And one thing I don't know, I'm sure you may be from.
It was a
Yeah.
gift, by the way. It was a gift to me.
Oh, nice. It is. It takes a lot of that weight off of you as well. Absolutely. One of the things we always suggest for families, and we usually provide it for them if they ask, and it's a free resource. We're happy to do it. Is the 5 wishes. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
I think everybody, no matter what age you are, should take the time, fill it out, and give it to somebody that you trust in your family or whoever, because it's not replacing your will for what you're going to leave your family when you're gone, but it's very explicit in how you want to be treated if you're not able to speak for yourself. It's a tremendous resource. I think it's approved in 41 out of 50 states, but I'm not going to say that because I'm not 100% sure right off the top of my head. But I know almost every state now does recognize it as a legal document. And I know one of my courses in college, it was a hospice and palliative course. We had to fill it out. It was the first time I had ever heard of it. And that was years ago, but it's such a powerful tool for families, and it's so easy. You don't need to involve lawyers. You can fill it out on your own. And I just know it's a great resource for families who are wanting to express their wishes, but maybe they don't want to go or don't have the means to pay for an attorney, or they don't want to upset a family member. This is just how you want to be treated. It's not anything about who gets what or what you're leaving to who. It's just how you want to be treated when you can't speak for yourself. And I think it's so powerful.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this question. So with your work, when a family comes to you, kind of walk me through that. Is they call you up at Cohen Caregiving Support Consultants, and we'll have all of your contact details and information in the show notes and on our website. What goes? They call you? Do they email you? Is it either way? How do you get contacted? And then from that point of contact, Bill, what's the process after that?
Mm-hmm. Speaking of lawyers, I'm going to answer that depends. No, it could be any manner of communication. I've gotten texts, I've gotten emails, I've gotten phone calls coming in through my website, messages, even social media. How can I need to talk to you, et cetera. Here's our situation. And like most professionals, I'm going to ask a lot of questions.
Sure.
I'm going to do a lot of listening. Of course, initial consultation, no strings, no charge. Let's get acquainted. Let's see what your situation is and determine what are their needs, what are their burdens, what are their stressors, what can I help them take off their plate so they don't feel so overwhelmed and burdened and alone. And once we do that, we can determine how I can help them. I can work either on a monthly support plan basis or an hourly basis. And it's just, like I said earlier, it can be soft skills, hard skills. Some of it is, specific people they should talk to, but it can also be just listening and holding their hand, figuratively or otherwise, and being a good ear, a good shoulder. Because sometimes that's what they need, is somebody a little bit like a therapist or a social worker. I am neither, but I am, again, a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
And I come from a place of, because I went through it, compassion and empathy.
Sure. And I think that's a key to all of this. It's one thing, like they say in school, you can be book smart, but not street smart. Like with our company, all of us have healthcare experience, but also we've all had loved ones that we have had to deal with long-term care issues on. And I just know, even with the education and knowledge that I have, going through it with one of my loved ones, it was very exhausting. It was stressful, and you just don't get that extra support when you go and you're looking for it, and it's just so important that families know that they're not alone. We facilitate quite a few caregiver support groups here in Michigan, and I'll never forget. I've talked about this on the show before. We had a lady coming. Her husband had just been diagnosed with dementia, though he was probably in the beginning stages of 3, maybe. And she was just beside herself. They'd both recently been retired. And she had a childhood friend that lived in the same town. The couples, her friend and her husband, and them, the wife and her husband, all four of them would go out every Friday for years. This was their thing, dinner and a movie. And the last 6 months, she hadn't been able to do it. And she came in this particular meeting, and you could tell she was visibly upset. And so, do you feel like sharing what's going on? And she said, my best friend of, 40 plus years just basically has written me off and says, you don't have time for me. I don't have time for you. She goes, and I just don't get it. She doesn't understand. And I said, you know what? This may not make you feel a lot better, but maybe this will help you understand a little bit. She can't understand because fortunately for her, she's not going through what you're going through. So she has no way of understanding that. If you get into a car accident, you have to send your car to the shop. You may have been in an accident. You're like, oh yeah, that's a pain. But when you have a loved one that's been diagnosed with something as serious and debilitating as dementia, if you haven't been through that or experienced it, you have no idea what it's like. And so I told her, I said, be thankful your friend isn't going through this, but just know not to take it so personal because there's no way you can expect her to understand. So don't take it so close to heart. Yeah, it's horrible and it's sad, but maybe when she settled down a little bit, write her a letter and mail it to her because she'll read the letter. She may not answer your phone call, but she'll read that letter, I guarantee you, and just explain it to her. Kind of explain, look, I'm not doing this by choice. Nobody would choose to go through this. And I think support groups are such an important integral part of the caregiving experience because so many of the families, and you probably can attest to this also, Bill, when they come to these support groups, they're coming in that first day thinking they're the loneliest person in the world and nobody knows what they're going through. But as they start coming, they can start seeing, okay, you know what? These other people, they're going through a lot of the same things as I am, and I'm not alone. And then that's where the power of the support group comes in. They develop that bond within the group so that if you're having a bad day next week and it's not time for the support group meeting, maybe you call that person up and say, hey, Linda, I was just thinking about you today. How's it been going, since the last group? That goes a long way when you're, a full-time caregiver for a loved one,
I like to embellish on the phrase that if you've seen one case of Alzheimer's, you've seen one case. If you've seen one case of dementia, if you've seen one case of aging, it's really just one case, even though there's common threads. And when you talk about support and you talk about people who are friends and family, there are many sources that they can come from. And your support system, your family is however you define it. I was fortunate that here I am trying to take care of mom, first long distance, then here in Portland while holding down a full-time job, which was like 45 minutes south of Portland. And she was in the opposite direction when I'd go visit her. So that was just, draining alone, that type of thing, and worrying about her every day. And top of it, I had a micromanaging horrible boss. We won't get into that, but you can imagine where my stress level was and my blood pressure. But my family was very supportive in a lot of ways, especially right after the storm. And I think if we've ever heard of the Savvy Caregiver classes, came out of Emory University, and they talk in terms of, there's collaborative and there's sequential or team, there's uneasy alliance, there's observed from a distance, or there's solitary. And there's different kind of caregiving families. And we kind of went through about at least 3 of those. Mm-hmm. It primarily fell upon me, but my family had gave a lot of support. They had a lot of opinions, but they always had my mom's best interest at heart. Right. And they knew my name was on the legal paperwork, so I had the final decisions. So my biggest message to families is have your meetings, have the discussions. You may not agree on every little thing, mm-hmm. but have the discussion and try to get all on the same page. And right. No, not everybody has to be the hands-on caregiver. Somebody can help with research. Somebody else can order things. Somebody can handle the finances. There are different roles that people can do. They can spend a couple of days at a time and give you a break. Yeah. Because wouldn't you love to go to a spa? Wouldn't you love to go for a massage? Wouldn't you love to have coffee with friends? So envision that and say, how can I make that time available for me? Because self-care is not selfish. It's vital.
Yeah. No, I think it's the top priority of being a good caregiver. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your loved one. Absolutely. I want to follow up with a question. So, like us, I'm sure you meet with a lot of families. You talk to a lot of different families about different situations. What do you do in the situation where you feel like a family is not making a very wise decision? Where you say, I don't know how you can think that because it's impossible. You know, leaving a loved one alone who may have dementia, who should not be living alone, or you know, how do you approach that with them?
Or driving,
Or driving, yeah,
things like that. Yeah, are they wandering? No, okay, are they safe at home? So I think what I do, and it goes back to that answer, asking questions, being a good ear, playing devil's advocate,
yeah,
or a mediator, and just, how would you think if, just do a lot of what ifs. How would you feel if such and such happened and you hadn't taken all precautions? Wouldn't you want that for yourself, for instance? So that you are safe at home or getting good care at home and happy at home. Things like that. I guess it's just asking the right questions and making sure that they are thinking things through properly, not necessarily, not just emotionally, which is
yeah.
going to be there no matter what, but
Well,
rationally and logically and logistically.
yeah. Well, and I find too that oftentimes it's more of just a deep denial that leads them to, they're reacting off of their denial, not off of the facts. And that always seems to be one of the more difficult situations to try to play even what if on, because if they don't think anything's wrong, well, that could happen. What if they drive and get in an accident? What if you drive out there today and get into an accident? It's kind of like, that. And that's the ones that are just, I feel really terrible about, because they're not looking at the reality of the situation. Or the flip side to that is, we're actually going to be having a discussion on this here coming up soon, where when the siblings don't agree, there's a struggle. One has control over healthcare, one has control over finances, but they're not on the same page. That causes quite a circumstance that is very difficult to remedy. Then they have the parent who's kind of being pulled in both directions. It's cute, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not good. But the parent will, one moment they'll side with the one that has decisions with healthcare, but as soon as the other one comes over who has power over their finances and the healthcare person's left, now they're siding with the one over finances. And then they're saying, well, dad's telling me this. Well, yeah, dad told me this. Those are the ones, it's just, those are the difficult ones, where you either have a family in such deep denial that they just won't believe anything. And then you have the other one where you have, kind of a internal conflict within the family, and you're just trying to help give them professional good advice and recommendations. And it just makes it challenging. How do you handle
Reminds
this?
me of two things. I just was recently contacted by a law firm that there are almost like what you were talking about, two brothers and mom's in a care facility. One already has power of attorney, but the other one is challenging it. And they're talking about, they're not agreeing about the care, and they're not agreeing about the legal and financial. And they're talking about getting guardianship, conservatorship. So they're not only costing themselves a lot of money and taking a lot of time for that, but just the fact they got two different lawyers involved in talking about it. So they were talking about, would you be interested in being a mediator, not as a professional one or as a lawyer, but taking that equation just to be, again, like a go-between, a devil's advocate, and help them come to agreement and realize they're just really not working in their own best interest or their mom's, because that is the bottom line. Yeah. What is in mom's best interest?
Right.
And then you were talking about people not responding well to a situation like that. I can think about a family member who has some issues, shall we say, and I was going to see him go pay a visit because we hadn't seen each other in a while. And there was a book, I don't remember the exact name, but it's something like when rotten relatives happen to good people, I think.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar?
I can't say that I'm familiar with it, but I'm sure it's out there.
But one of the first chapters I start reading, it says, when you have somebody who has some issues like an addiction, shall we say, or some mental health issue, and you start telling them what to do or making suggestions, what's the reaction going to be? I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Get out of my life, what have you. And what it talked about is give that up. Don't even try. What you do is you go in and connect, you talk, you discuss, establish that common ground, and then maybe start making some suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what he did. We reconnected, and he says, that's not a bad idea. And you're really good at that caregiving thing. You could probably help me with this. Which paved the way so much easier to having that conversation. But that's the kind of thing I can do with families. I even did it with Mom. If she was usually very cooperative. She trusted me. We had a good relationship, made me power of attorney, etc. But even before the hurricane, I said, Mom, you seem to be struggling with the taxes. They're just sitting there. Would you like me to come there and help you out? Oh, yes, please. So it was kind of like getting her to come to the decision, but almost like she had made it.
She let her think she came up with it. Right. Yeah. Bill, what would you want listeners and viewers to know about Cohen's caregiving support consultants?
Most people in our field with taking care of a person living with dementia, and I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, are focused on the care recipient. My focus is on the caregiver, so they can not only take care of their loved one, but also take care of themselves. And going back to what I said about being a certified senior advisor, that I take that holistic approach. I am looking at all the needs. I'm putting together the team, putting together your advisors, whether it's legal, financial, health, home care, whatever it is, to, again, take care of the whole family, not just take care of one part of it and just on the care recipient, because don't operate in a vacuum. I mean, that's
Right.
all too important. And that's why so many caregivers feel alone and exhausted and hopeless and overwhelmed. And I'm trying to help them alleviate as much of that as possible. We can't make it better. Unfortunately, especially when it comes to most forms of dementia, including Alzheimer's, it's only going to get worse. It's going to get harder. Although many people, not all, actually become a little more manageable, because ignorance is kind of bliss. They don't realize after a while what's happening to them, and they don't fight it so much. They're not in so denial so much. I'm fine, that, get me out of here type of thing. It's more, oh, hi, good to see you, and everything else. Yeah, they're taking good care of me. We had a nice lunch. If they may not remember what they had for lunch,
Right.
but things like that.
Now, you have an online support group also on Facebook, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yes.
if anybody, we'll have the link to that in our show notes and on the site. But if somebody wanted to join that, do they need to request an invitation, or is it an open group?
So it is visible, meaning you can search for it and find it.
Mhm.
And then, yes, you would ask to join, ask a couple of questions, read the rules, because we want a nice, friendly environment.
Sure.
And then join in from there. What's beautiful about it, it's in most states and provinces, and people on 6 continents.
Oh, wow.
Which is really cool. And I don't do all the content. I don't do all the posting. The members themselves not only do posting, but they support each other. They give ideas, they give suggestions, they comfort each other. And it's just heartwarming and gratifying to see that, because even though we call them Facebook groups, it's a community.
It's a community. Absolutely. I think that's really important, because I know one of the things that we constantly had issues with our support groups, ours were all in-person support groups. And they're well attended, but we'd always get phone calls from people saying, I would love to come. Can you send me the information? Because the way we kind of would run it, it would meet, and then we'd provide them with documentation or resources for that particular day's topic. And there's usually a activity sheet and then an open discussion and things. But the one thing about an in-person support group, if you're taking care of your loved one and you can't leave them alone, you can't very well go to an in-person support group. So I think an online support group is a tremendous thing for families.
And I've actually have 3 different support groups that I do. A couple are monthly, one is weekly. Happens to be that I'm literally across the street from a care community, and that's when I do weekly, so it is handy. But we did all go to virtual online for the past almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
We started transition into hybrid and in person. We're going right back because there's a lot of local areas that are having problems, and it's out of my control. It's not my decision, but we're going back to Zoom for foreseeable future. But
Yeah.
my Facebook group, which has a monthly support group, will always be virtual. So
Sure.
it'll always be available.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, Bill, I just cannot thank you enough for your time today. It's been helpful, informative, and I'm really going to encourage people to reach out to you because, there's no shortage of caregivers needing that support, that information. And like you said, you're a trusted source. And I know we've spoken a couple of times now, I think. And like you mentioned, Alexis was on the show not too long ago, and we just had a tremendous response to her interview. And I really appreciate the work you're doing out there in Portland, and Alexis, and you guys are doing great things for the long-term care community.
We love to collaborate and help people as much as possible. And as I mentioned, I do help people all over the country, especially because of virtual. And if I don't know a resource right off the bat, I'll find them.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here today, Bill.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here.
We want to say thank you for joining us today on All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. Please visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can provide us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. We would also like to say thank you to Bill Cohen once again for taking time out to join us today. Remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We look forward to seeing you again next time on All Home Care Matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.